Eric Friedman. My name is Eric Friedman. I'm Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs at the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Pronouns are he, him. I am white male with graying hair. I'm wearing headphones, a blue checked shirt, and a blue tie. I'm in front of a navy blue background with the words NYC votes in yellow behind me. I want to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting of the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. Now that I've kicked us off, I'm going to look to the Chair Zoila Torres to take over the meeting. Zoila?
Yeah, sure. Welcome, everybody. Just to take care of some logistical matters tonight, we'll try to get through them as quick as possible and get to the meat of the meeting, so to speak. We are being live streamed right now by NYC Votes Facebook page. And we'll be recording on YouTube within the next few days. We are also being interpreted by the American Sign Language Interpretation and Live Transcriptions. And this will help us be more inclusive of people who are either deaf or hard of hearing. We will also have audio descriptions of those who are either blind or of low vision capacity. I will start off by describing myself as an introduction. I am a Puerto Rican of African descent. Born in New York City in El Barrio, raised in Brooklyn, and brown hair, graying as quick as I am aging. And I guess the meeting tonight is basically focusing on the voter analysis report that the commission is putting out. It looks back at the 2021 elections, both its administration and voting and other issues as well. We will look at the voter turnout in the report, and also focus on a number of legislative and policy recommendations. This report looks at ranked choice voting. It analyzes ballot data, which shows that voters did embrace ranked choice voting in the 2021 primary elections. The actual report will be released later this week, and I'm very excited to hear the previews in tonight's meeting. As Eric was describing, we were preparing for a primary in June, but as the courts have decided that the voting maps have not been approved and will probably be pushed back to August. So we'll be discussing that also tonight, as well as the NYC Votes outreach plans, which will include a description of the volunteers, the partner organizations, and youth leaders. We will also be looking at the updated educational materials that are going out, both citywide and online. The The contents will be focused on efforts to improve the accessibility of these materials to voters with limited English proficiency and for voters with disability. I mean, that's in a nutshell my introduction to this meeting. But before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to Amy Lapretz. I'm sorry if I didn't get that right. Amy, can you deliver your report, please?
Yes, great. Thank you. I am Amy Loprest. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. I use the pronouns she, her. I am a white woman who is bald, who is wearing a black headdress and a teal shirt. I'm sitting behind me is a bookcase and a red chair. So I just have a couple things. As the chair said, the late breaking news, the Court of Appeals has thrown out the congressional districts as drawn. And so we are in the process of, there is a chance that the primary will be moved to August from June. And we are following that story very closely to make whatever changes we need to make in our plans for outreach for what would have been the June primary. I also want to comment on April 12th, as most people know by now, the Southern District of New York, United States Attorney's Office indicted former Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin on allegations of fraudulent contributions to his 2021 comptroller campaign. Later that day, the Lieutenant Governor resigned from office, although he does remain on the ballot as of this moment for Lieutenant Governor for the primary that will be either in June or August. As the indictment made clear, in February 2020, the CFB's audit staff identified potentially fraudulent contributions prior to issuing any public funds payments. Those contributions were not matched with public funds, nor did they factor into the campaign's qualifying for public funds threshold. We've been working closely with the Southern District of New York office in this matter. We appreciate the work of the Southern District of New York, the FBI, and the New York City Department of Investigations, and we'll continue to review their findings. As everyone knows, the Matching Funds program allows more New Yorkers to run for office and helps ensure that our government better reflects the diversity of our great city. To protect taxpayer funds, the program requires rigorous audits, including post-election audits for all campaigns. The post-election audits for the 2021 election have begun and are underway, and we will continue to audit all campaigns and monitor developments in the case of former Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin. I also want to thank the staff and throw my congratulations, and we'll hear about the voter analysis report. It is a tremendous body of work and requires a tremendous amount of work. And so I just want to commend the staff in our public affairs division who did an enormous amount of work pulling together the analysis, the design, laying this out, writing the report, and getting it out into the public's eye. So congratulations to everyone who worked on the report. It is an amazing piece of work, and I encourage everyone to read it carefully. And I will turn it back over to Eric.
Thanks, Amy. I think we're going to now move on to our outreach report, which will include Omar Suarez, the Director of Partnership and Outreach, to discuss the outreach plans. And
Excuse me, Chair, I think first, before we hear from Omar, I just want to invite Amanda to talk a little bit about today's decision and the impact that it will potentially have on the work we have planned for this year.
Oh, sure. Go right ahead.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you, Eric. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Malillo. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Affairs at the Campaign Finance Board. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a white woman in my mid-30s with dark blonde hair and brown eyes. I am currently sitting in an office cubicle with a polka dot umbrella behind me. I thank you for the opportunity to sort of chime in before we hear from both Omar on our outreach activities and Crystal on the voting education materials that we've put together for this election. As I'm sure you can imagine, we have spent the past many months preparing for a primary that would take place in June. Today's court decision does throw a wrench in that. We are now looking at two different options. One option that I think would probably be the least desirable one is that the primary could theoretically be split into two. So the voting maps that are okay and good to go could still proceed with the June primary for governor and state assembly, and then we could see a congressional and state senate primary occur in August. I think the more streamlined and desirable outcome for voters is to have one single primary happen in August, even though the downside is this may cause some voter confusion for anyone who is preparing for that election in June. The Board of Elections has already been preparing and sending out materials, as have we. So now we have a little bit of work to do to regroup on and think about how we're going to start communicating out these changes to voters. I am going to turn it over to our staff. They're going to talk about all the things that we have been preparing. I am just right now adding the caveat that we are already discussing how we're going to start pivoting in the hours since the decision happened. So I'm also happy to field any questions about that people have after these presentations are over. Thank you.
Great. Should we move on to the outreach report, which is by Omar Suarez and Crystal Joy. Omar, you're on.
I'm on. Is my audio okay? Thumbs up if you can hear. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Omar Suarez. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Outreach for the Campaign Finance Board under our NYC Votes Initiative. I'm a tan-skinned Afro-Latino. I have curly black and white hair, and I'm sitting in front of a blurred background. I'm going to share my screen so that we can get into the presentation. I'll give a very brief presentation in terms of the things that we've been working on to prepare for outreach efforts for the June, what had been the June primary. And I think, you can see that still up on the slide. So with that context that Amanda gave, some of what I'm sharing will have to be reconfigured based on the latest court decision. But we can still talk about some of the work that we've been doing to prepare voters and prepare to increase voter participation. Just as a form of introduction, I also want to just give you all an idea of the partnerships and outreach team that I lead. Includes 4 members, and I want to make sure to give them all a shout out. Olivia Brady, our youth engagement coordinator, Sean O'Leary, our field and volunteer coordinator, and Gary Patel, who's our senior partnerships manager. There's a photo here of them, which I'm not going to go into audio description of, but I'll provide the slides with the text for these images after the fact for those who are unable to see. And to get right into what we've been planning for this, for outreach for this primary, we took from January to March, we spent really speaking with partners that we worked with since last year on the citywide primary, just to learn kind of what they needed, how they wanted to engage and work with us on voter engagement this coming year, and do as much learning from the past year as we could. As the calendar shifted to April, we really moved more into voter education mode, direct to voter, as well as through our community partners. And I'll talk about some of what that has looked like and will look like. And once we shift to June, again, this will be subject to change. We'll go into get out the vote, our get out the vote activities, and I'll talk about what some of those are as well. So right off the bat, one of the things that we have been preparing for the last couple of months was the distribution of these voter education materials. My colleague Crystal will go into a bit more of the background and how these were created and the effort that went into making them as accessible as possible. I will say that we had a mini voter guide booklet, which includes a lot of the common pages from the annual voter guide that goes out, including descriptions of the offices on the ballot, key dates and deadlines, voting information on voting rights and voting accessibility, and just everything except for the candidate profiles for the most part. We also included a palm card, which was, again, something that we learned from having conversations with our partner organizations throughout the city. Was they really could use some collateral that they could include in their outreach efforts that was easily adaptable, had all the key information about the upcoming election, and that they could use at their outreach events. And then the last piece was a large print flyer that again included information about the election date, key deadlines, and what's on the ballot. So these, we conducted outreach and ultimately were able to get these printed and mailed to close to 500 locations throughout the city. These included all the major library branches, public library branches throughout the 3 systems in the city: the New York Public Library, the Brooklyn Public Library, and the Queens Public Library. The elected state and local elected officials' offices, community boards, and community-based organizations. So these went out, and folks have been receiving them over the last couple of weeks. We also have some that will be available for pickup and for our use in our in-person outreach. And I will go into some of the translation and accessibility features, or I'll leave that for my colleague Crystal. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the return of our Youth Ambassador program. So this is the second year that we're running this as a paid youth leadership program where we bring in young people from high schools throughout the city to do 2 things: to really learn about the importance of city government, how city government functions, and the principles of civic engagement and voter mobilization, but also to put some of those lessons into practice and develop their own voter mobilization plans and events and execute on those. So last year, we had 15 ambassadors, and for the June primary, they were able to reach over 1,000 of their peers. This year, the program application was open from February 14th to March 11th. We got over 500 applications from young people ages 14 to 18 throughout the city. Those were reviewed by members of our unit, each and every one of them. And we interviewed 45 of the youngest, the ambassadors who kind of stood out the most and are now preparing for that final selection process. We'll be announcing the cohort in the coming week. So really looking forward to that and to you all being able to meet them. The coming year, they'll be, again, going through some of that training to learn some of the history behind New York City government, but also learning how agencies function, how campaigns function, some of the principles of voter mobilization, and also setting up events where they will, either through their school or through community organizations, set up events to mobilize their peers for the primary and general elections. So we're looking forward to bringing those young folks on board and developing the next generation of young civic leaders. The next piece, we have been working on what's called a relational organizing program. This is, it's a tool that's common in political organizing where you can get people to behind a cause that they really care about. In our case, it's voting and voter participation. And then they can receive information from you, the central organizer, kind of looking at this graphic on the side where you have organizers in that center who then distribute information out to leaders, and then those leaders out to their networks. So the way it works is we have calls to action around voting deadlines, key voting resources that become available, including the voter guide and graphics that come from our marketing team as well. And so people who work with us in this program will then share it out with their network. And so we're working with individuals and community organizations to take part in this using our platform. So moving on, just to keep an eye on the time, we are returning to in-person outreach. So I'm just listing off some of the upcoming in-person activities that we'll be taking part in, including some tabling events with the public libraries, voter registration workshops with high schools. We also are going to be restarting the voter registration for newly naturalized citizens at 26 Federal Plaza in partnership with USCIS. And we have this year started we've joined the Voting Rights on Rikers Island Working Group with the Department of Corrections and Legal Aid Society to register voters at Rikers Island. So that's something we've done for the last 2 months, and we're going to be doing that on a monthly basis and working to deliver other resources in addition to voter registration. So that voter guide booklet, we were able to get several thousand copies to Rikers Island to be distributed to people in custody there, so they could understand what's on the ballot and what they're voting for. There are approximately 6,000 to 7,000 people in custody in Rikers Island, and the vast majority of them do have voting rights. So it's important that we can share that information with them. As we get closer to the primary, initially this was set for June, but we do have a couple of ongoing get out the vote activities planned for the primary. Principally, we'll be doing text banking. And so as it's worked in the past, we set up days of action where we bring in volunteers to send text messages to voters throughout the city. Last year, we sent over 1.1 million messages to voters between the primary and the general. This year for the primary, we're looking at about 500,000 voters with those volunteer text banks. And the focus for us is going to, as it's been in the past, youth ages 18 to 29, people living in immigrant communities, specifically throughout Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, and voters who in the past have not voted in midterm elections. So we always want to see where we can get conversions from people who vote in presidential years to sticking around for the midterm and off-year elections. I should add, we did have a text bank or several text banks for the special elections that happened earlier this year, where we were able to register over or text message over 100,000 voters in those special election districts in February and March. So that was Assembly District 72, 60, and 43. We messaged every registered voter in those districts with a cell phone. And we will be having one of those special election text banks on May 21st for the May 24th special. The last thing, just before I close out, between now and the primary, we're also hosting workshops and presentations with partner organizations throughout the city where we cover what's on the ballot, why midterm elections are important to vote in, again, the key dates and deadlines, how the different forms of voting and how they work, and how to use the resource that NYC Votes has available. These are conducted, in some cases, giving presentations, for example, at a community board meeting, all the way to setting up a dedicated event, which we're doing with Democracy Prep Charter School in May. And In addition, we're working with folks like CUNY, the public library branches, the Department of Education, local civic associations, to set these up just on a consistent basis between now and the primary, where we can use their audience to deliver this information and reach voters. So I'm going to close out with that. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I can stick around for a bit.
Yes, we're opening it up, I guess, later on in the meeting for questions and comments from the participants. I think we can move on very quickly on to Crystal Choi, who's Associate Director for Production, to discuss the educational materials that are being prepared. Crystal, it's up to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Crystal Choi. I'm the Associate Director of Production of the Marketing and Digital Communications Unit at the CFB. I use she, her pronouns. I am a 41-year-old East Asian female with light skin, dark brown eyes, medium-length black hair, and I am wearing a white collared shirt with bright pink and blue flowers on the front, sitting in my office cubicle.
Okay.
Can everybody see my screen? Great.
Yes.
I will be giving a preview of materials we've been preparing for the upcoming primary election. I will also give an overview of the CFB's new language and accessibility mandates and how the Marketing and Digital Communications Unit plans to support them. As mentioned before, although it is most likely to be rescheduled, the primary is currently scheduled for Tuesday, June 28th, with the early voting period occurring from Saturday, June 18th to Sunday, June 26th. We are currently preparing the online voter guide, which is scheduled to be published the week of May 31st. We collaborated with our candidate guidance and policy division to conduct outreach to over 300 candidates who were anticipated to be running for a state or federal office. Thanks to recent enhancements, for the first time, we are now able to receive these candidate profiles via the voter guide submission application, the same submission form we use for city candidates. Previously, state and federal candidates were asked to submit profiles via a plain form on our website, which involved a significant amount of manual processing. Opening the VGSA to state and federal candidates allows us to extend our streamlining of intake, processing, and publishing to these elections by reducing the risk of manual error and increasing our processing rate. Candidates can upload their photos and submit their profiles, which includes information about their occupation, education, organizational affiliations, and prior public experience. They also indicate the top 3 issues they would address if they are elected and provide a statement which allows voters to learn more about their campaign. To date, we have received 149 candidate profiles. We then easily export the content for review and work with our vendors to translate and dynamically publish them, creating our online voter guide at nycvotes.org, which already includes general voting information we publish year-round. Complementing our website, we have prepared a postcard with information about the primary that will be mailed citywide. Voters who are registered in a party with a primary will receive one of the 4 versions at random. We provide key dates, a list of offices on the ballot, and additional voting resources, which includes a QR code for our website. And as Omar mentioned before, we have also worked with partnerships and outreach to create additional materials and resources, including an abridged version of the printed voter guide. Although it does not contain the candidate profiles, it does provide information on how to vote, voters' rights, accessibility resources, and information about the offices that are on the ballot. We've also collaborated on creating letters for volunteers to do outreach and informational palm cards, which were also made into large print flyers to expand our reach. Many of these resources were translated and produced in Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Bengali. We also partner with the Civic Engagement Commission to provide the palm cards in Arabic, French, Haitian Creole, Italian, Polish, Russian, Urdu, and Yiddish. This brings me to our new mandates and our plans to support them. Starting in January 2023, the CFB will be required to translate voter education materials into an additional 8 languages. We'll also produce accessible formats such as Braille, and large print versions of materials and resources. We currently have an active RFP out for translation services and will be evaluating proposals from vendors in the upcoming weeks. We hope to select a vendor who has experience in producing materials in all 12 languages, which will simplify the coordination that is needed to improve efficiency. We're also researching software that will better integrate translations across our systems and help streamline our translation processes. In order to support this increase, we'll expand our production team to include a language access manager and a language access specialist. We'll also be looking to fill our production manager role to continue overseeing the coordination and execution of all of these projects. We're well on our way, and we look forward to all the new exciting work we'll be doing. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Just a point of information, should we proceed now to Ali in her presentation, Ali Swatek, who is Director of the Policy and Research, to discuss the voter analysis report and take on questions or comments after her report, or do we want to move quickly to proceed to take comments and questions on the reports that have already been rendered? Eric, what do you suggest?
So I think we can pause for a moment to see if there are questions from members of the committee who are with us or folks who have joined us for the meeting on some of this matter relating to this year and our plans for this year's election. We'll give just a minute before kind of moving into our comprehensive review of last year's activity with Ali and her team. But if folks have questions, members of the committee or folks who have joined us for the meeting, you can use the raise hand function in Zoom there on the bottom of your screen to be recognized. I'll give it a few seconds, but to see if we have comment.
Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, we should move on to Ali's report.
Wonderful. I'll take a second before we do just to thank Omar and Crystal for their presentations, for their work, and for presenting this evening.
Yes, thank you, Omar, and thank you, Crystal. Okay, Ali, it's up to you.
Hi, everyone. So I will not be presenting alone, but I will introduce myself first. My name is Ali Swatek. I use she, her pronouns. I am light-skinned with dark brown hair and eyes, and I'm wearing black glasses and a white sweater today. My office cubicle is also my background tonight. I am the Director of Policy and Research at the Campaign Finance Board. Our team conducts intergovernmental outreach, performs policy and legislative analysis, and also produces original data-driven research on voting and campaign finance issues. So one of our primary opportunities to publish our research is in the annual voter analysis report, which we're going to present to you tonight. We are a small but mighty team of 4 people currently. So 3 of us are going to be presenting tonight and will introduce themselves as well. But I would be remiss to not also mention our amazing data manager, Jamie Anno, who will not be presenting tonight, but without whom we would not be able to produce the amazing research that we are about to present to you, especially the ranked choice voting ballot analysis, which I'm going to present basically on her behalf because she did such a tremendous amount of work on that section. I'm going to pass it to Raina to introduce themselves now. Raina, you're on mute still.
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Raina. I use they, them pronouns. I am a fellow on the policy and research team. I am a non-binary individual with short brown hair, white skin. I'm sitting in front of a white background, and I have on a gray sweater and a purple colored short shirt underneath. And I'm going to pass it over to Luigi now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Luigi Claude. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the policy analyst on the team. I am a young Black woman, and I'm also wearing Black. I also always have on earrings, and today my pair are tortoiseshell hearts, and I'm sitting in my room. I will also share the presentation right now and kick off our overview of the voter analysis report.
Okay.
Before I get started, I want to double check that everyone can see my screen and hear me correctly, and that great, we're all good. So just to kick it off, I want to start our overview. And before we jump into what we're doing, what you can see in the report this year, I just want to provide a bit of context. We've been publishing a voter analysis report for the past 11 years. We started in 2010, 2011, and we publish it because it's part of our charter mandate. And in that mandate, and as you'll see through the rest of the presentation, we are required to talk about NYC votes and the effectiveness of our programming, data about voters and their voting choices, and recommendations on how to improve voter registration and participation in the city. And so this year, we've broken down that requirement into 7 parts. The executive summary and the year in review cover an overview of what voting looked like in the past year and what to expect in the report. Then we discuss what NYC Votes has done, and you've seen that in the presentations that have come before. And then we turn over to the data analysis section, which is really 3 sections here. A general look at the past year's elections and voting behavior. And then we have 2 sections that do a more deep dive into voting, one on early voting and one on ranked choice voting. And then we finish out this report, like all other reports, with a legislative and policy recommendation section, which, as that's my main section of the report, I take a lot of pride in that one. And I like that we always end with, now that we've kind of done this deep dive in this analysis, what can we do to improve? Last year, we saw 2 very different elections. And I just want to do this as kind of like our general overview before we go into depth about what you can actually see in the report. So it was 2 very different elections. In the June primary, we saw a successful citywide use of ranked choice voting and a large pool of candidates that voters had to pick from. In the general election, we saw a large decrease in voter participation, and New York voters rejected the election reform proposals on the ballot. But throughout the entire year, we saw the continuation and sometimes the solidification of COVID-related voting accommodations and the election of a new mayor for the first time in 8 years and the most diverse city council ever. These are just a few of the things that stood out from this past year and are in the report and kind of draw a through line of all the analysis and the recommendations that we share. And now I'm going to turn it over to Raina to talk about voter turnout in 2021.
Thanks so much, Luigi. So I'm going to be presenting on voter turnout in the 2021 election cycle. Next slide, please. So there are approximately 4.9 million registered voters in New York City, which is about 90% of the approximately 5.4 million citizens of voting age in the city. Next slide, please. And of those 4.9 million registered voters, about 3.8 million were eligible to vote in the closed primary election, and about 26.5% of those turned out to vote in the primary. Next slide, please. Turnout in the general election was lower than that of the primary election. Although all registered voters were eligible to vote, only about 23.3% did turn out to vote in the general election. Next slide, please. So here we see a comparison of all 3 of the last citywide elections in this decade. And what we can see is that turnout in the primary was actually a historic high, while turnout in the general election was a historic low. Next slide, please. This table has turnout for both the primary and the general election broken down by age. So turnout for people ages 70 to 79 was highest of all age groups for both the primary and the general election, while turnout for voters under the age of 30 was lowest, again, for both the primary and the general election. For the general election, turnout among voters aged 70 to 79 was actually over 3 times that of voters under 30, which is just a reminder of the importance of voter outreach for young voters in the city. Next slide, please. So here we have a comparison of overall turnout to voter turnout among newly registered voters who registered to vote for the first time in 2021. So in the primary, newly registered voters turned out at a rate that was much higher than the overall turnout rate, which suggests that there was a group of New Yorkers who were motivated to register to vote for the first time in order to vote in that competitive primary election in 2021. But in the general election, turnout among newly registered voters was actually a little bit lower than overall turnout. Next slide, please. So voters in the general election did not only vote on citywide elections, they also voted on 5 ballot proposals to amend the state constitution. Of the ballot proposals listed here, ballot proposals 2 and 5 passed, while ballot proposals 1, 3, and 4 failed. And what's listed on this table is ballot proposal drop-off, which is the percentage of total ballots cast where the voter skipped voting on that specific ballot proposal. So for example, of the approximately 1.1 million voters who voted in the general election, about 22.9% of them skipped voting on ballot proposal 1. So these rates of drop off are actually quite high. They're high compared to the rest of the state, where ballot proposal drop off rates ranged from 11% to 15.1%. So the high rate of drop off in the city may have contributed to which of the proposals passed and which proposals failed. Next slide, please. So 2021, the general election was the 5th election in which voters had the option to vote early instead of on election day. And in the voter analysis report, we did an initial analysis of the factors that influenced voters' decision to vote either early or on election day. Next slide, please. One of the main factors that we identified involving a voter's decision of whether or not to vote early was the distance from their home address to their assigned early voting site. Voters who ended up voting early in the 2021 general election lived over 0.2 miles closer to their assigned early voting site than election day voters, which indicates that distance from an early voting site may influence voters' decision of whether or not to vote early. Next slide, please. So here we have the average distance from voters' home address to their assigned early voting site, broken down by borough. So voters in Queens, for example, must travel on average nearly twice as far as voters in Manhattan in order to vote early. Next slide, please. So we developed a model where we isolated the effect of distance from an early voting site on a voter's decision of whether or not to vote early, controlling for other factors that might influence this decision. And what we found was that a 1 mile increase in a voter's distance to their assigned early voting site decreases a voter's likelihood of voting early by 16.8%. Next slide, please. So based on this finding, we make 2 recommendations. The first is that the Board of Elections should more equitably locate early voting sites. As I mentioned before, right now, the distance that people in boroughs must travel in order to vote early varies dramatically based on the borough that the voter is located in. And we don't believe that voters should have to travel dramatically different distances in order to vote early. And the second recommendation that we make is that New York City should adopt a vote center model where every voter in the city can vote at any early voting site in their county rather than vote in only the one assigned early voting center. And New York City is actually the only area in New York State where voters are not allowed to vote in any site in their county. So that's our second recommendation. And now I'm going to pass it over to Allie to talk a little bit about the analysis that we did on ranked choice voting.
Thank you, Raina. Okay, so this section of the report is very long. I'm not going to lie. It's almost 40 pages long. So the slides that I'm going to distill right here are just a very small snippet of what is actually included in the report itself. Raina did a really good overview of the turnout for the primary and the general, but there are also so many nuggets of great information in that section that they put together. So I just want to highlight that we are only we're only doing the highlights here. There's lots to find in the report itself, which is quite long, but very worth looking at. Next slide, please, Luigi. Okay, so the question we get asked most often about ranked choice voting is how many 2021 primary voters utilized rankings? So this is the information I'm going to definitely start off with. 88.3% of primary voters ranked more than one unique candidate in at least one race on their ballot. 11.7% did not rank anywhere on their ballot. So we got this information through analyzing what the Board of Elections released as a cast vote record. It's a completely anonymized spreadsheet of every single ballot cast in the June 2021 primary election by every voter. And I already said this, it's anonymized, so we can take out certain pieces of information from it, like the contents of the ballot itself, who that ballot voted for, but we don't know the voter. We can't assign a voter to that ballot. So the information that I'm talking about here is completely anonymized. So I'm so sorry, I lost my mouse here. So when we talk about this 88 to 11% number, I'm gonna just dive into the 11.7% of people who did not rank anywhere on their ballot first and give you a little more information on those voters. Next slide, please. So when we say 11.7% of voters who did not rank, most of a large majority, almost all of them, are what we're calling single choice voters. And so there's this subset of voters who only voted for one candidate in a race. I'm going to talk about the mayoral races for these two statistics just because it's a little easier to do that. But I'll also have some statistics from the from some council races later on. And again, the report includes information for borough president and comptroller and all of the other things on the ballot. So in the Democratic mayoral primary, 13% of those voters were single choice voters. In the Republican mayoral primary, 48.3% of voters were single choice voters. Of course, there were only two candidates on the ballot in the Republican mayoral primary, so it makes sense that most of those voters treated that race like a single choice race. You're only choosing between two candidates. It's not really intuitive to rank both of those candidates. I'll talk about the write-in in that race a little bit later on, but just talking a little bit more about this 13% of Democratic mayoral primary voters. There's nothing wrong with not ranking anywhere on your ballot or choosing to be a single choice voter. That's a choice that's available to voters. The word choice is in the word in the phrase ranked choice voting. If they want to do it, voters are able to single choice. For those who rank, they're able to more fully express their opinions on the candidates on the ballot, but your opinion may just be that you like one candidate and only want to vote for that candidate. So that's perfectly fine. We also can't really say without surveying this group of voters whether they were choosing to vote for a single candidate because they didn't care for another candidate on the ballot, or because they didn't realize what ranking meant. So that's kind of just something that I'll leave up in the air. We don't have answers for that, but we do know that there were 13% and 48% respectively on these different party mayoral ballots who chose to single choice vote. Next slide, please. There is a subset of this type of this single choice voter that is called a bullet voter. And in ranked choice voting, that means that you voted for the same candidate across multiple choices. So in a ranked choice election, for example, in the Democratic mayoral primary, there were 5 choices for 13 candidates. A bullet voter would just vote for one of those candidates across every single choice. So for first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, and fifth choice. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with bullet voting. You can do it. It doesn't invalidate your ballot. Again, it's just an instance of, you're not fully getting to experience the possibilities of ranked choice voting. Luckily, bullet voting is exceedingly rare. Only 0.7% of Democratic mayoral primary voters bullet voted, and 4.4% of Republican mayoral primary voters bullet voted. Next slide, please. When we talk about bullet voting, the way that we're able to pull out information about whether the number of candidates on the ballot impacts your likelihood of bullet voting is by looking at council races. So the number of candidates on the ballot actually does influence a voter's likelihood to bullet vote. In our analysis, as the number of council candidates increased, the odds of bullet voting went down by almost 12%. And you can kind of see why intuitively. Maybe if there are more candidates on the ballot, you want to rank more than just that one candidate who interests you, because there's greater likelihood that there's another candidate that interests you who you'd want to rank second or third. Next slide, please. So next I'm going to talk about the 88% of voters who ranked and just give you some interesting statistics about that group. So there are something that we looked at was which races had fully utilized rankings and the percentage of ballots that used every possible available ranking in that specific race. So again, talking about the Democratic mayoral primary, of the ballots that were cast in that race, 46% used all 4 rankings. So it's pretty high. For the Republican mayoral, 6.1% were used. And while that does not sound like a high number, something to remember is that this race only had 2 candidates. So when we're talking about utilizing the full number of rankings available, we're also talking about ballots who not only ranked those 2 candidates, but also a write-in candidate. So that's kind of an interesting statistic here. The Republicans, in this instance, who fully utilized their available rankings, actually ranked both the candidates on the ballot and a write-in, and that was 6% of ballots. So a big interest in ranking, surprisingly, in that race. Next slide. We also wanted to give you some statistics on the council races that were most likely to have fully utilized rankings. That means all 5 ranks were used. And as you can see here, these are races with a lot of candidates running, much more than the average number of candidates, which was only 6 council candidates. So the top fully utilized rankings district was Council District 26 in Queens, where really close to half of ballots used all 5 rankings, which is a huge percentage of ballots there. And something I think sorry, next slide. Getting ahead of myself. So something that we wanted to know was whether the number of candidates in a race increased the likelihood of a council, basically the odds of you only ranking one candidate. So what we found was, as the number of council candidates in a race increased by 1, the odds of ranking only one candidate decreased by 12%. So this seems intuitive again, where, you have more candidates to choose from, you want to utilize your rankings more often. And it's something to consider about conversations we have about competitiveness in elections. And sometimes you hear folks say that the more candidates that are running, the more confusing it is for voters because they have to learn more information about all of the candidates that are running. But possibly it's actually not as confusing for voters. They're hearing specifically from people who are whatever they're saying is resonating to them, and that makes them more interested in getting more involved in voting for them, or at least ranking more of those candidates on their ballot. Next slide, please. So this is a really, really small percentage. And what I'm talking about here when I say perfect ranking score, it's a voter who used every possible available ranking on their entire ballot. For those voters who went to the ballot box and voted in the Democratic primary in the 2021 primary election, I believe on most ballots, there were 5 times 5 available rankings. So these are the voters who used all 25 rankings for a unique candidate. And so this number is really low across all ballots. It's 0.82% of voters. If you look at it across, separated out by party, only 0.64% of Democrats had a perfect ranking score, but 3.7% of Republicans had a perfect ranking score because there were fewer opportunities available for them to rank, and they were more likely to enthusiastically use those opportunities, which I think is very interesting. Next slide. So this is a really important slide for voter education. We wanted to see where in the city ballots were likely to be invalidated because of a fatal ballot error. A fatal ballot error is one in which a voter's intention is impossible to ascertain based on how they've marked the ballot. So it's not clear who they wanted to vote for, or they voted for too many candidates. The most common fatal ballot error is called an overvote, and that's when a voter marks more than one candidate in a single race. So across the city, 1.2% of ballots had at least one overvote error that invalidated that race on their ballot. This is pretty comparable to the error rates that we see in San Francisco and Minneapolis, places that also use ranked choice voting. But the thing that we want to take away from this for our voter education is that the distribution of these fatal ballot errors was not consistent across the city. So you can see the darker colors indicate that there was a higher percentage of overvote errors. And those are the places where I think we can focus our voter education and outreach in the upcoming 2023 ranked choice voting elections in order to ensure that folks understand how to mark a ballot and are fully prepared when they go to go do so. Next slide, please. We had 2 recommendations related to ranked choice voting improvements ahead of the 2023 elections. The first was to publicize a schedule for ranked choice voting results reporting. I think we all remember that the initial ranked choice voting tabulation that was released by the Board of Elections did not have the correct results because some test ballots were included by accident that kind of inflated the number erroneously. They were able to catch that issue and fix it really quickly. But one of the degrees of uncertainty in that space was that there was no schedule that we knew of when ranked choice voting results would be reported by the board. And so there was no understanding of when we'd have final results and know who, more importantly, who our mayoral nominees would be and who our city council nominees would be. So we recommend that they publish a schedule for results reporting going forward. And the last one is, as folks who used the cast vote record very extensively over the last year, we would like for them to reorganize it so that it's a little clearer for researchers in order for there to be more analysis like the one that we just did, which took a very long time to put together. It should be readable and understandable by folks who don't have the level of data analysis skills that we have on my team, which allowed us to thankfully do this research. But it should be visible and viewable and understandable by people throughout the city. I believe that is the end, and I'm passing it to Luigi for a wrap up of our legislative and policy recommendations section.
Yes, thank you, Ali. So this year in the report, we decided to chart the policy and legislative recommendations we've seen since we published our voting reform agenda report in 2019. So this highlights some of the recommendations that have actually been enacted or implemented in the past 3 years. And that includes rights restoration for parolees, consolidating primary election dates, allowing pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, allowing early voting, and most recently, creating an advisory committee for voters with disabilities, and paying for postage for absentee ballots. So this is not even all of our recommendations that have been enacted and implemented, nor is it all of the recommendations that we have suggested in past years. So if you want to see a full breakdown of all of those, please check out the first couple of pages of the legislative and policy recommendations, because we break down all of those, just to keep track of what we've done and what we are still pushing for in the future. Raina and Ali have already talked about the recommendations that we've put in the report about ranked choice voting results reporting and early voting, but I also wanted to highlight that we included recommendations to improve language access, absentee voting, and voter registration. In total, we have, I believe, 14 recommendations throughout the entire report, and I could not go throughout all of them this afternoon, nor do I think that you want me to, because it's a lot and it covers a lot. And so I really hope that just this little taste of what we have really encourages people to go through the report and read what we're recommending, both for improvements on the policy side, but also a lot of improvements that start in the state, just so that what we believe are good elections and voting improvement are available to all New Yorkers and aren't, as some of the COVID accommodations have been, just partial to an executive order or on the moment decisions, and not really sustainable or sustained throughout the entire process. And now I'm going to pass it back to Ali to close out our presentation and talk about what you can look forward to in the future.
Thank you, Luigi. So because we're already thinking about the 2022 voter analysis report, naturally, we're looking forward to seeing the state and federal races in 2022, although today's news did briefly give me a heart attack that we would have 2 primary election turnouts to compare to, again, instead of the consolidated primary, which makes things a lot easier. So we'll be looking at state and federal turnout compared to the city races in 2021 and the presidential races in 2020, and seeing if different types of voters turn out in those elections based on who's on the ballot. We'll also be looking at special elections, which there have been a lot of this year. I think we had 5. There's still one upcoming for assembly due to there being vacancies. And then the year before, we had 4 city council elections at the beginning of the year. So we're going to be looking at turnout in those races and how it differs from elections that take place during the regular on-cycle elections that would normally happen for city and state races. And then lastly, we're also going to be researching the impacts and feasibility of big structural changes to our electoral process or system. So there was a lot of discussion after turnout in the city races about moving the elections potentially to an odd number year. What does that look like? Who's impacted by that? Is it a good idea? Those are the sorts of questions we're going to be trying to answer in the 2022 voter analysis report. We'll also be talking about and making recommendations about implementation for the Our City, Our Vote law that recently passed in the city council that Crystal was telling us a little bit about our preparation for, as well as the expansion of our language access mandate too. So that's something to look forward to. Another thing that I will say, and because I've already said this, I'm just repeating myself. This report is really long. It contains so much fun information. There's something in there for everyone. I would highly recommend everyone read it when it comes out this Friday. We also have some fantastic interactive maps that are really cool related to all of the facts that we just gave you on each of the slides. And I'm just really proud of what our team was able to accomplish during this really important year and be able to kind of historically capture the 2021 election cycle for New Yorkers. So thank you very much for allowing us to present, and we can answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Great. So maybe we should open it up for questions. And before we go into the questions, I want to apologize to Ali for mutilating her last name. For someone whose first name has always been mutilated, I know how it feels.
You did pretty good. That was a pretty good one.
Okay. There was a question that the hand was raised about when will the report be published. I think Eric was the one that answered it. Eric, can you just reiterate when the report will be published?
Sure. I will defer to Ali here, who looks ready to answer that.
Oh, okay.
It's this Friday. So this was kind of a preview for folks who are listening in before you get to dig into the full report. It's really beautifully designed, and there's going to be a great presentation on our website as well that's going to host those interactive maps. We're hoping to also possibly have a fun little search tool to see how your ranked ballot compares to everyone else's ballot, how likely your ranking was. So that's something to look out for too.
Yeah, I will note that it may be Monday by the time the report gets to the website, but no later than Monday, or that is our kind of legal deadline.
And Charlotte posted the link in the chat. It's on our nyccfb.info website will be where it posts.
I'm just gonna, I want to encourage folks, if they have questions, use the raise hand function in Zoom. You can use the chat or the Q&A. I'm going to lift up one question that we have in the Q&A from Ben Weinberg, who says, thank you for this informative presentation. Do you happen to know if, and this could be Ali for you or for Reina Luigi, do you happen to know if the overvote error you had mentioned is different than previous years?
So I think, thanks for your question, Ben. I think that Ben is asking about the overvote rate in single choice elections, which is definitely possible. I do not know the exact number off the top of my head. I will say that there is a whole section of the report that discusses overvotes and the comparative rates in jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting, but we did not calculate it for the single choice general elections that have happened in New York City, just because we didn't really think it was it wasn't directly comparable. I think it's better to compare it to other ranked choice jurisdictions, but we're on a similar level as they are.
Okay.
Hope that was helpful, Ben. If you have a follow-up, let us know.
Oh, good. He said thanks.
Okay. Any other
questions, members of the committee?
Yeah.
Folks who have joined us tonight, questions for Ali and for her team on the really just the fantastic matter that they presented tonight.
Right. Okay.
I see a raised hand here. This is from Chair.
Yes. Were there any raised hands? I'm not sure. Were there? No. Nope. Any comments, questions, points of information?
Yep. Please feel free to type a question in the chat if you have one.
We'll wait a couple of minutes to see what, we can wait a few seconds actually and see.
There
All
is
right,
one
so-
more question in the question and answer about the age breakdown.
Yes, will the full report go into an age breakdown?
Yes, not only do we go into age breakdowns in the report, but we also look at geographic differences between the boroughs, and we even get down into community district level comparisons of turnout. There will also be a cool map for that too.
So just a follow-up comment from Joseph. It's curious if older adults had a harder time using ranked choice voting. Was there any evidence of this in the data?
So, so it's a little hard to answer that question because the cast vote record is not associated with an individual voter. We can only associate it with an election district that the ballot was cast in, and election districts can have thousands of people in them. So we ran a regression model to take a look at a number of different factors that may lead to someone being more or less likely to rank through something called a ranking score that we invented to kind of judge whether someone was using all of their rankings or not. But we can't really conclude from that whether or not someone had difficulty using the ballot. The best we can do for looking at errors and things like that is doing geographical analysis. So we can see that in specifically, I'll just say like in the South Bronx, which is an area we know also has really low voter turnout, there was a higher rate of overvoting fatal errors to the ballots. So I don't think that that's an area of the city that has more older voters, but we know that that's an area to focus our voter education and outreach in.
Right. Right. So to your point about the cast vote record analysis, once the ballot is cast, it's anonymized. Right. So you don't know who cast that ballot. We know where it was cast, but not who did it.
Yes. So it makes doing analysis like that a little challenging. One thing I will say is we are interested in doing a survey to voters and asking them direct questions about their experience using ranked choice voting. There was one survey done by Edison Research, Rank the Vote and Common Cause, that did not show any demographic or I think it was ethnic and racial differences in using rankings and understanding how to use ranked choice voting. But I cannot off the top of my head recall if there was any specific instances of older voters understanding ranked choice voting more or less than others.
Okay, then anyone have any closing remarks they want to make? Hearing none, I guess we can conclude this meeting, this April 27th meeting.
Amy, but before you close out, Amy, I see you just came on camera. Are you do you have something to chime in before we close?
Did I raise my hand?
No. My apologies. I just saw you come on camera there.
I mean, I will say something. I mean, that was a great presentation, and thank you everyone for presenting. And I hope everyone looks forward to the report because, I mean, I had the pleasure of reading it, and I read it on my phone because I was out of town, and it was, like even though the charts were tiny, it's still an amazing body of work. So I really encourage everyone to read it.
Yeah, and I just want to, before we close out, just second that and really kind of add my thanks first to everyone who prepared and presented tonight, to Omar and Crystal, who talked a bit about the plans ongoing, and we'll certainly have to deal with today's news, but ongoing plans for this year's primary elections, to Reina and to Luigi. And for Ali for not only for preparing that presentation on the report tonight, which looked great and had a lot of great information, but for all the work that went into putting together this year's report, which is really is set kind of a new standard for us in terms of our voter analysis. Really just kind of like looking at what was a unique historic year in New York City, and helping explain it to folks who are going to carry this work forward. So thank you guys, and thanks for your presentation tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Eric, if there are people that might want to make a statement after the report is published, is there a contact, a number or email address or something in the report that people can make comments to?
For certain. Well, again, I will take this opportunity to encourage everyone to connect with NYC Votes wherever they get their news. We are on the social media platform of your choice. You can learn all about the work that we're doing to engage voters around the city at nycvotes.org. Has full, the full range of our products and information that we provide to voters. As noted, both in the chat and here in this discussion, you can find the report when it is published at the agency website at nyccfb.info. Lots of information about the Campaign Finance Board and all of its programs there. So please be on the lookout for more on all of those platforms.
Great. Well, hearing no more comments, and it's 10:50. So we actually not only make time, we did time. So I think we can start to move and log out.
Thank you, Chair.
My last reminder for folks: next meeting of the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee is scheduled for Wednesday evening, June 29th. Traditionally, that is our post-election hearing. Stay tuned for news on whether that will indeed be our post-election hearing.
Great. Okay, I guess we're logging out at 10:50. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining us.